The day that would mark the collapse of Prospect Innovations started much like any other in New York City. People hurried past one another in Midtown, coffee cups in hand, barely glancing up as cars honked and lights flashed. In the gleaming lobby of Prospect Innovations, everything seemed under control, with guests and staff moving to their routines. But that illusion was shattered by a small, seemingly harmless act. When Madison Reed, the billionaire CEO of Liberty Tech, walked through the front doors, she did so quietly. No entourage, no announcements, just herself in a tastefully simple outfit that did nothing to reveal who she was. Olivia Vasquez, the receptionist, saw Madison take a seat in the waiting area. Without recognizing her, Olivia made assumptions based on her plain appearance, barely acknowledging her and offering a cold smile before asking her, rather dismissively, what she was doing there. Moments later, 2 security guards approached and, following Olivia's lead, escorted Madison out, thinking she was a stranger with no business inside. Madison's face remained calm and polite throughout, showing no anger or frustration, but inside she took careful note of the prejudice in each word and gesture. As she walked onto 42nd Street, she was already starting to piece together a plan, one that would address not only the disrespect she had experienced, but also the problem within Prospect Innovations itself. No one inside could guess that this brief, thoughtless moment would set events in motion that might change their lives and the company's future forever. Standing across the street, Madison took a moment to look back at the towering glass facade of Prospect Innovations. The building sparkled beneath the early sunlight, all polished steel and expensive windows, a symbol of everything most people would call success: money, influence, and endless ambition. Still, as she watched employees rush in and out, she knew appearances could be deceiving. She believed the real strength of a company came from how it treated people at all levels, especially those who were too often overlooked or made to feel invisible. Smoothing her jacket, Madison made up her mind. Today would be a true test, a way to see firsthand if Prospect Innovations embraced the values it liked to promote on its website and during public events. The idea of a partnership had once excited her, but now she felt a deep responsibility to uncover the truth about their culture before making any decisions. Re-entering the lobby, Madison saw everything with new eyes. She noticed that when a sharply dressed white man entered, the front desk staff beamed and eagerly greeted him. As she moved forward, they barely glanced at her, acting more wary than welcoming. The difference was impossible to ignore, and it hurt more than she expected. But that pain crystallized her intent. If no one else was ready to question these habits, then she had to be the one to push for change, no matter how much resistance she faced. Inside the lobby, Olivia was busy scrolling through her phone, barely aware of who was coming or going. She seemed lost in some text conversation, thumbs moving quickly across the screen as people passed by. It was only when Madison stepped forward, clearing her throat and politely asking to confirm her appointment with Robert Kim, the CEO of Prospect Innovations, that Olivia finally looked up. The look she gave Madison was a mix of boredom and thinly veiled contempt, as if someone was bothering her with an unimportant task. Without a smile, she asked for Madison's name, her eyes scanning Madison's clothing in a way that made her feel uneasy. Madison repeated her request calmly, but then Olivia lazily leaned back and gave a sarcastic reply. Under her breath, loud enough for Madison to hear, Olivia muttered that people like you probably had the wrong entrance and that the service door was around the side. The implication was clear and deliberately cruel. Madison felt the sting of humiliation, but didn't lose her cool. Instead, she asked Olivia once more to check the schedule for a meeting with Robert Kim. With a dramatic sigh, Olivia started pretending to type, but made no real effort to check anything. Her attitude only grew more hostile until she threatened, to call security if Madison did not leave at once. Madison stayed poised, quietly repeating her request, while Olivia glared at her without a hint of respect. The tension in the lobby started to build. Olivia's patience snapped as she moved from behind her desk and grabbed Madison's sweater sleeve, her grip tighter than Madison expected. In a loud, sharp voice, Olivia demanded that Madison leave the building immediately. Madison, steady and dignified, met Olivia's stare, her voice low but strong, as she insisted on being treated with respect and asked once more for her meeting to be confirmed. Despite this, Olivia showed no sign of backing down. Instead, she raised her voice, shouting for security and making sure everyone in the busy lobby turned to watch the scene unfold. Their conversation stopped, their gazes fixed on Madison as if she were some sort of threat. 2 security guards rushed over, responding to Olivia's call almost too eagerly. Without asking for details, they took Madison by the arms and began to escort her towards the front doors. Madison refused to make a scene. She kept her head up, but couldn't help noticing the shocked looks from a few onlookers. Among them was Daniel Foster, the executive vice president, who stood a few steps away near the elevators. The instant his eyes met Madison's, recognition flashed across his face. He knew exactly who she was. Still, he just stood there quietly, ducking his gaze, clearly choosing to do nothing. His decision to stay silent rather than intervene sealed the fate of Prospect Innovations in a way that none of them, at that moment, could truly imagine. On the upper mezzanine, away from the swirl of chaos in the lobby, Denise Carter watched what was happening below, clutching the railing so tightly her knuckles turned white. Denise was the only black manager at Prospect Innovations, and she understood all too well what Madison must have felt. Memories of moments when she had been belittled or dismissed at work came rushing back. Times someone had questioned whether she belonged at all, or looked at her in that same way Olivia now looked at Madison. Every part of her wanted to call out, to run down the stairs and stop the injustice unfolding right in front of everyone. But the fear held her still. Denise worried about what would happen if she spoke up. She could lose her job, her reputation, maybe even everything she had worked so hard for. As Madison was led toward the exit, her gaze swept the room and met Denise's eyes. There was no anger, only a steady look of strength and resolve. In that silent moment, Denise felt Madison's determination pass between them like an unspoken message. Stand tall, you are not alone. It lit something inside Denise that was both hope and restlessness, making her wonder if it was finally time for things to change. Outside on the busy sidewalk, Madison paused and glanced back at the bold, shiny logo of Prospect Innovations gleaming above the main entrance. Her face was mostly calm, but a hint of a smile showed she had not lost control of the situation. People on the street barely noticed her as they hurried by, but Madison slipped her phone from her coat pocket and with a soft voice issued simple instructions. She told her personal assistant to start Plan B without any delay. Every ongoing negotiation with Prospect Innovations was to be cancelled that instant. There was no turning back. She felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment as she ended the call, knowing she had just made a decision that would shake up the company more than any public scandal. Walking toward her waiting car parked along the curb, Madison straightened her shoulders. Each step she took, she felt more certain that what happened inside could not be ignored. This was never just about a partnership or a missed meeting. Underneath all the glitter and the fancy branding, there were problems at Prospect Innovations that ran far deeper than most people realized. Madison knew she had just set something in motion that would open everyone's eyes to the truth. Inside the tall, glass-walled lobby, Olivia was riding high on her so-called victory. She leaned back in her chair with a smug smile, convinced. She had done the right thing by forcing Madison out. Around her, a couple of other co-workers joined in, making snide remarks and laughing under their breath as they watched Olivia bask. It was almost like a twisted celebration, with comments bouncing between them, feeding into the arrogance that seemed woven into the place. Daniel Foster, meanwhile, watched the scene unfold and then slowly crossed the lobby to Olivia's desk. His face was smooth, but there was a cold edge to his voice as he leaned in and told Olivia she had done a good job keeping the wrong sort out. He said it loud enough so she would feel proud, but low enough so no one else would call him out for what he really meant. Olivia glowed at the praise, not realizing that Daniel was using her as a pawn in bigger office politics and power struggles. In truth, he did not care about her at all. For Daniel, Olivia was just another employee he could manipulate, a small piece in his game to mold Prospect Innovations into whatever he wanted, without taking any risk himself. Back upstairs in her small office, Denise Carter sat quietly at her desk, hands folded tightly together as if to hold back the flood of emotions that threatened to spill out. The echoes from the lobby still rang in her ears, a harsh reminder of moments in her own past when she had faced similar treatment. The images of Madison being forced out by security replayed in her mind, making her feel powerless all over again. Guilt pressed down on her chest, heavy and unrelenting, as she wondered what might have happened if she had just spoken up. It was tough to shake, the thought that nothing in Prospect Innovations was ever going to change. Suddenly, there was a soft knock at her door. A younger co-worker, Megan, peeked inside with worry in her eyes. She asked if Denise was all right and mentioned that everyone was talking about what had happened in the lobby. Denise tried to look calm, but her voice was shaky as she said everything was fine. The truth was she could barely hide how rattled she felt. In a place like this, Denise knew that speaking out could cost her everything. For now, all she could do was keep quiet and cling to the hope that one day she might find the courage to make a real difference. As Madison walked away from the glass doors, her phone started buzzing in her bag. She glanced at the screen and saw it was her assistant, Lauren, calling. Lauren's voice came through with a sense of urgency, explaining that Prospect Innovations was now frantically trying to reach Madison, hoping to reschedule the meeting or clear up any misunderstandings. Madison did not hesitate. Her response was short and final. She told Lauren, "It is too late. Any company that allows this sort of behavior does not deserve our trust. Make sure all communications with them are cut off." Settling into the back seat of her car, Madison took a slow breath. She watched the city bustle past as her driver pulled away from the curb. She was already thinking 2 steps ahead, making rough notes on her tablet about who to contact next and how to share a careful message about what had happened. This was bigger than just her pride. Madison knew that her rejection of Prospect Innovations would get attention throughout the business world. It was meant to send a message. Companies that clung to old, toxic habits would not only lose deals, but would be called out for it. For Madison, this was the start of setting new standards. Within less than an hour, the buzz about Madison's company cutting ties with Prospect Innovations spread like wildfire across the business networks. By midday, news outlets were blasting headlines about the sudden break, and investors started to panic. Stock alerts pinged every few minutes as shares dipped and shareholders demanded answers. Rosalind Green, the CEO, could barely keep up as her phone rang non-stop with calls from board members and frantic emails filled her inbox. The leadership team was quickly ordered to meet in the executive conference room for an emergency session. People hustled through the halls, some whispering quietly as word of the fallout reached every corner of the building. Meanwhile, Daniel Foster sat at his desk with the calm of someone who was a step ahead of the storm. While others looked nervous, Daniel wore a slight, almost pleased expression, like he saw this disaster as an open door. He watched Rosalind field question after question, knowing that every bit of public backlash and shaken confidence would only make it easier for him to push his agenda. Daniel did not bother pretending to care about the chaos. If anything, he saw the fallout as the perfect chance to weaken Rosalind's grip and line up his own move for more power within Prospect Innovations. The emergency meeting quickly turned tense as the executives crowded around the big conference table. It did not take long for the truth to come out. Someone finally explained bluntly that Olivia had blocked Madison from entering the building that morning. Because of that one decision, Prospect Innovations had just lost its most important strategic partner. At first, people could hardly believe it. There were murmurs of shock, some shaken heads, and a few gasps that were louder than expected. As the full story unfolded and everyone realized the partnership was gone for good, anger and disbelief filled the room. Rosalind Green tried to hold herself together, but it was clear she now understood this mess went deeper than one employee's poor judgment. Losing Madison's company was just the latest in a long line of issues caused by a workplace culture that had let biases and arrogance go unchecked for years. For too long, subtle acts of disrespect had been tolerated, and now the consequences were impossible to ignore. While emotions ran high, Daniel kept his thoughts hidden. He shot careful glances at Rosalind whenever she looked away, already nudging conversations in directions that would make her look even weaker. The tension in the air was thick, but Daniel's own plans seemed to grow with every uncomfortable pause. And when the meeting ended, Rosalind left the conference room with her jaw set, moving straight toward the lobby with a crowd of managers trailing behind her. Olivia sat rigidly behind her desk, still. Surrounded by a few co-workers who earlier had joined in her laughter and gossip. The mood was different now. No one was smiling or making snide comments. Rosalind did not hesitate. In front of everyone in the lobby, she called out Olivia, stating plainly that her actions had cost the company its most valuable partnership and put everyone's future at risk. Olivia, who just hours earlier oozed confidence, was now pale and shaking. It hit her in that moment how quickly those who had cheered her on faded into the background when things turned bad. Rosalind's words left no room for excuses. Olivia's dismissal was immediate and final. Her name badge and access card were taken, and security quietly guided her out. The shock cut through the building. People who once brushed off the toxic culture or laughed at others' expense stood in heavy silence as the reality of what had happened settled in. The atmosphere grew tense and uneasy. No one needed to say it out loud. The company they thought they knew had changed in the space of a single afternoon, and there was no telling what the next day would bring. Outside, Madison stood by her car as Lauren relayed the steady stream of news coming from inside Prospect Innovations. She listened calmly, not letting any sign of satisfaction or anger show. Deep down, she understood this was not really about getting even. What mattered was that her decision had kicked off a chain of events that was finally dragging the company's problems into daylight. This was only the beginning, and Madison was focused on the bigger picture, knowing these changes would force others to take notice and maybe even rethink their own ways of doing business. Madison's focus sharpened. She turned to Lauren and told her to call their legal team. She wanted them to move forward with a discrimination and defamation lawsuit right away. As she looked across the busy street, she made it clear this was never about just one argument, at a front desk, or trying to settle old scores. Madison spoke firmly. This was about standing up for what was fair for everyone. She wanted her team to understand this was a move for justice and real change in the industry, not just a personal fight. With that, Madison headed to her next meeting, ready to keep pushing for something better. It did not take long before the incident blew up way beyond the walls of Prospect Innovations. Clips from the office cameras and some shaky cell phone footage made their rounds on social media. Within hours, thousands of people across the United States were talking about what had happened. Outrage spread quickly, with news anchors discussing the company's actions on evening broadcasts and hashtags trending on every major platform. The story was everywhere, and public pressure built up fast. As the day went on, the company's market value took a nosedive. Investors watched their shares lose value in real time, and the financial news made sure everyone was aware of the drop. The building that used to feel so secure now seemed on edge, with rumors flying in every department. Olivia's termination was official and made public, and soon an announcement went out that she would also be facing legal consequences for her role in the scandal. Meanwhile, Daniel, once so sure he could use the chaos to his advantage, started to realize just how bad things had gotten. The crisis was barely controllable, and for the first time, Daniel worried that his own plans might backfire. With so much turmoil, even Prospect Innovation's future began to look shaky. The next morning, just as employees tried to settle into some kind of routine, another shockwave rattled Prospect Innovations. News hit the internal messaging boards. First, then spilled into national headlines. A fresh leak of emails showed Daniel had been sharing classified information with Caroline Walker, the CEO of their biggest rival, Pinnacle Dynamics. The messages were clear and left no room for denial. Daniel had passed along product blueprints, sales forecasts, and insider updates, all in secret messages stretching back several months. The leaks left everyone feeling exposed and betrayed. Rosalind barely had time to process the disaster before she was called into the glass-walled boardroom. The board was already there, including the chairwoman, Evelyn Parker, whose presence alone said things were serious. Rosalind faced Daniel with open disappointment and demanded to know why he had done it, pain and disbelief written across her face. Daniel tried to offer excuses, but was quickly cut off. Evelyn made it known that these actions would not be handled quietly or internally. She stood up and said she would refer the matter directly to federal authorities, making sure the company took responsibility for a long history of looking the other way. The fallout was not just personal. It was a sign that Prospect Innovations needed real change, starting immediately. Word spread fast. After Daniel's role in corporate espionage and financial fraud hit the news, federal investigators moved in, launching a full investigation that took over every floor of Prospect Innovations. Reporters set up across the street, waiting for updates and new angles. The company's remaining clients started backing out of contracts one after another. Some called personally to say they could not be tied to a company with such a serious stain on its record, while others simply let legal notices do the talking. Even longtime partners quietly walked away, leaving the sales team with nothing but apologies. In just a few weeks, the company's reputation went from respected to infamous. No amount of press releases or public apologies could patch things up. Industry groups started using Prospect Innovations as a cautionary story when talking about trust, culture, and compliance. Employees who stayed felt like they were waiting for a ship to sink. Hallways were quiet, offices emptied faster each day, and no one dared to decorate their spaces anymore. The board met for one final vote. After a long, heavy discussion, they agreed to file for bankruptcy. The shining office tower that once stood for ambition and success now just loomed, cold and empty, as a warning to anyone who might think they were above honest work. Not long after the courtroom chaos, Daniel was taken into custody. The news ran footage of him being led out of his apartment in handcuffs, face stoic but eyes downcast. Meanwhile, Rosalind vanished from the limelight entirely. She moved to a quiet town in Oregon, renting a small house away from the cities, in Buzz, hoping to find some peace in the middle of so much disappointment. The fallout hit hardest, though, for Olivia. With her name splashed across headlines as part of the scandal, Olivia found every door closed to her. No tech firm or startup wanted her on their team. Word got around, and soon even old friends made excuses to keep their distance, while family gatherings grew tense and uncomfortable. She went from group chats and weekend dinners to spending. Most nights alone, her reputation too heavy to shake off easily. The final blow came with a stack of legal papers delivered to her apartment. Madison was demanding millions in damages for discrimination and emotional harm. The amount seemed impossible. Olivia did not have that kind of money, not even close. Watching the life she built fall apart, fueled by her own poor choices, Olivia finally realized that the path she took could not be undone, and regret settled in deeply. In the middle of her loneliness, when her phone hardly ever rang anymore, Olivia got an unexpected call. It was Madison's lawyer on the other end, his tone calm but direct. Instead of forcing Olivia to pay the massive sum in damages, Madison had decided to accept another form of justice. The settlement would be changed to require Olivia to put in hundreds of hours of community service at a center that supported minority groups in Los Angeles. The lawyer said that this was not about revenge, but a chance for Olivia to do some real good and hopefully understand the harm she had helped cause. Feeling a mix of embarrassment and relief, Olivia agreed right away. On her first day, she walked into the community center nervous and unsure. She did simple jobs, cleaning, handing out food, running errands for people who came in seeking support. She spoke with men and women whose stories reflected the deep scars of discrimination. Each conversation forced her to think about her own actions and the pain she had contributed to. The work was slow and sometimes uncomfortable, but Olivia could feel something shifting inside her. She did not expect forgiveness or to erase her past, but each week gave her a new sense of responsibility. At the same time, Zoe packed up her things in the emptying office of Prospect Innovations. Each item she placed in the box brought back memories, late nights, tough deadlines, and tense meetings that had become normal over the years. As she looked back at the quiet desks and blank computer screens, Zoe felt both relieved that this stressful chapter was ending and sad for the loss of the team they had once been. There was comfort in closing the door, but a heavy feeling in her chest reminded her that so much had changed so quickly. As Zoe taped up her last box, her phone buzzed with a call she did not expect. It was Madison, her old colleague, whose steady voice broke through Zoe's haze of uncertainty. Madison had heard about everything and wanted to offer more than just kind words. She explained that she recognized Zoe's talent and admired the way she had spoken up, even when it was risky. Madison was now helping to shape an innovative new initiative at Brightpath, and she wanted Zoe to take the lead. The whole idea was to build an organization focused on fairness and real inclusion, where good work and honest values would really matter. Moved by the trust and opportunity, Zoe said yes. She felt ready to start again. Several months later, Zoe stepped into her new role as director of the Fresh Start Hub, a center for innovation set up in the very building that once housed Prospect Innovations. Instead of empty halls and sad reminders, the space was now full of energy and possibilities. Colorful murals covered the walls where sterile corporate logos used to be. Zoe noticed young people from all corners of Los Angeles, gathering in the shared workspaces, bouncing ideas around and building things together. It felt like the building itself had been reborn, no longer a symbol of failure, but one of hope. On the day the Fresh Start Hub officially opened, Zoe stood next to Madison in front of a crowd that completely filled the auditorium. Former employees, community leaders, families, and local students all came to watch. Madison spoke first, talking about how integrity and care can replace bias and arrogance, and how real change comes from facing mistakes. Zoe followed, sharing her own past struggles and the belief that second chances belong to everyone. The applause was long and genuine, with even a few tears in the audience. As they looked around the room, Zoe and Madison understood what they had built. They had turned a painful past into a launchpad for a better future, lighting the way for thousands of young people who once felt pushed aside.